perfect time to get into the topic of conversation this morning. Isabella Obara, and she is the technical lead, litigation and legal advice, IMLU Kenya. We also have Mheshimiwa hapa, Anthony Kibagandi, representing his constituency, Parliament himself. On the subject this morning, and we're discussing police brutality and the youth. We also have Commissioner John Waiganjo. Thank you for being here. IPOA, Independent Policing Oversight Authority. So speaking of Ruto at one, I think is how it was phrased, with the at on the front page of the Standard. You evaluated the Kenya Kwanza administration's, Isabella, performance in the last year on the commitments, campaign promises that were made with regard to extrajudicial killings and the like, and the conduct of the police during the, quote, mandamano. So there were some things which you said, okay, the government has done well here, and there are some areas you said, no, fall short of your expectations. So I just already, Melita, oh no, who was it? Brian Mushi filed a report on this, and we saw that earlier. But let me just highlight some of what you stated in your report. Progress. You know, usually we deal with so much bad news. Let's take a look at some good news, or what is going right. The appointment of a senior pathologist is indeed a positive development, indicating a commitment to improving the investigation of reportable deaths. However, the full implementation of the Coroner General's office is imperative, and you'll tell us why that is. The completion of the human resources instruments in readiness for appointment of the Coroner General, positive. The government's commitment to resolving all judgments and orders against it within a 60-day time frame is certainly commendable, such as the appointment of Court of Appeal judges and facilitating the return of Miguna. The disbandment of the Special Service Unit marked a significant step in the right direction, although there are those who are asking, did they disband it to create another one? The establishment of a task force on police and prison reforms under the capable leadership of retired Chief Justice David Maraga represented a promising stride towards creating a dignified work environment for our law enforcement officers, and also in a parallel move aimed at achieving financial independence for the National Police Service, the appointment of a principal administrative secretary as the accounting officer was a pivotal step in the right direction. This appointment aimed to ensure the police could operate autonomously, free from undue influence from the President's office. Dismal performance. Now, IMLU says, however, data from our daily monitoring in the last 12 months demonstrates that the government has performed dismally with regard to, one, democratic policing and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Let's see, indeed, the freedom of assembly, association, expression, and media freedom has faced unprecedented threat. Freedom of assembly, association, expression, and media freedom. And you back this up by saying in the past year, we have witnessed a wave of punitive policing during protests, extrajudicial executions, deaths in custody, deliberate torture of children, interference with investigative authorities, unconstitutional interference of the National Police Service, and other critical human rights violations. This is a very serious charge, this one, for me at least. Okay, not that they're not all serious, but this one of deliberate torture of children.
Yes.
Why do you make that statement?
First, let's start. Olive, context is key, right? So even when we are noting and commending, or we are talking about this more performance, it's based on something. First, IMLU's mandate is to prevent and to respond to cases of torture and related violations. Obviously, torture in the context of it being a violation, an intentional violation of inflicting pain, either physically or mentally, for a purpose. So there has to be intent by a public service officer, right? So that's our mandate. And then now you go to the manifesto of the current government that was launched on 1st of July, 2022, right? So therein is where we picked what it is that we are rating them against. So this is not a creation of the mind. So based on our mandate and what it is that they promised with regards to enjoyment of fundamental human rights and freedoms. And so we picked some of the things that were of key interest to us based on what it is that we have as our strategic plan. And that is how we scored them. So now on the commending, right?
Do you want to start with the positives? Okay.
Yes, we can start with the positives, especially because we are known as civil society to be one maybe a group that always, quote unquote, either is in bed with opposition or maybe just does things to cry and cry foul continuously. But that's not the case. And we do not want to mix human rights with politics at this point. I mean, so just so we are clear, let's start with the commending. We were speaking about the appointment, or rather the seconding of a senior pathologist to the Attorney General's office. And so what many may not know is that we have the National Coroner Service Act 2017 that is set to set up a service where we have 47 pathologists, and one is the Coroner General. Why is this important to Kenyans? We have had cases of reportable deaths, right? A reportable death, in essence, is where a life ends unnaturally. For instance, say you die in custody, maybe you die in a mental institution, or maybe you die in questionable spaces. Who is supposed to ensure that this particular death is reported accordingly, or rather investigated? So a Coroner General, what they do is they answer the question of who this person was, how they died, why they died, and when they died. Currently, it's being done in the criminal law courts, through an inquest, which we believe, our considered opinion is that that particular space is mad with corruption and ways in which that we may never be able to find the truth when we have a reportable death. So for us, it is commendable that we currently have someone who's been seconded there, but we feel like it's moving very slowly. We do not have the momentum that we need. Keep in mind that the space around torture and related violation has now expanded. We've moved from deaths in custody. Now we are looking at enforced disappearances. We're looking at torture of children. We're looking at institutions such as mental health spaces where we lose people in questionable ways. So it is important for us to have a Coroner General and a service fully set up to look at what it is that we're dealing with when it comes to cases of extrajudicial executions, right? So then we remove it from the criminal courts, and then we have it in a specific service, streamlined, and then we can now answer the questions of, was it extrajudicial or was it natural, right?
But my question, from what you've stated, is what would keep the coroner's office from being mad by corruption the same way you're alleging the criminal courts are?
Well, look, these people, or rather this service is expected to be independent, number one. Number two, you cannot investigate yourself. The way we have it right now is that the person who has a vested interest in the outcome of this particular investigation is the one that investigates, right? And if you look at how it is that it has been going, is that we have the blue code of silence. Every single time we're looking at who did what and how did they die. Truly, if you look at the rate of success in terms of inquest, we may not even be talking about 2%, right? Look at a simple case of Baby Pendo, and if it's anything to go by, if you look at the ruling therein, the court cited critical questions as to how the investigation was undertaken, the documents that were produced, and the outcome that came. So for us, we feel that it's important to have the Coroner General and the service in place to ensure that we are not now talking about extrajudicial execution from a place of maybe confusion or maybe favoritism or some bit of layers of cover-up, or maybe even dismal, performance or attendance to what it is that we're looking at. So that for us is commendable. The second.
And if you could just give me a second. Commissioner, I'm also curious because some of the positive highlighted here is financial autonomy for the National Police Service. When this president came into office, he met yourselves at State House in Nairobi. And one of the complaints IPOA has made is resourcing, that there hasn't been sufficient resourcing of IPOA to enable you carry out your mandate to its not really full potential, but you get my meaning. Yeah. So how has the last year been for you under the Kenya Kwanza administration?
Yeah, even as I go through that, I want also to comment on the coroner, because the Coroner's Act has taken quite a bit before its operationalization. And within that act, there's an express clause that requires the coroner to report to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority over deaths in prison custody. As it is, IPOA do not have mandate to, to oversight the prison services, the KWS, the Kenya Forest Service. All these are uniformed services.
Oh wait, hold it. So you exercise oversight across all the, apart from the military, I'm assuming, disciplined forces, uniformed.
National Police Service.
Exclusive the National Police Service.
Exclusive National Police Service. But when the military, for instance, is deployed to do the work of the National Police Service or the NYS, are deployed to do that work, or KFS or KWS, then they become under the armpit of the independent IPOA.
Okay, all right.
But now, in the Coroner's Act, there is an express provision where the coroner is required to also report to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority any deaths in prison custody. Therefore, bringing our torch on oversight to prison services and deaths within that service. Because what we do now is that we just look at the deaths within police custody, police cells. So I want to say that I'm happy also to note that there is a task force, or there's a committee, I think, that has been appointed by the Attorney General to come up now with to operationalize and to, to have a coroner in Kenya. I'm also happy about the acting coroner for now. Let's call him that, but I'm hopeful that he will not act forever, that we will have a substantive coroner in Kenya who will, like Isabella says, will be reporting on those deaths, on homicide. It's very important, actually, because instead of lashing matters to court on judicial inquest, then the coroner will have something to say. For instance, IPOA itself gets a lot of problems and challenges when we are trying to, access post-mortem reports. Even our officers sometimes are locked out of post-mortem, and we really want to be there. The family wants to have their pathologist, IPOA wants their pathologist. But then you find when
Locked out on what grounds?
We get a lot of challenges because we get a lot of uncooperation from the members of the National Police Service in instances where we are investigating. Those are national challenges that we used to deal with. It has improved lately because we have improvised a way of, tight cooperation from the top, the IG, the 2 DIGs, and we have established a system whereby we come in the chain of command so that they know now that any death in police custody must be reported within this period of time, within 24 hours, to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. And now coming to your question on the resourcing of... All right.
So I'll ask you, shikilia tu hapo, Mahesh, because I don't want you to lose out. What do you make of the positives enumerated by IMLU, the positive steps forward taken by the Kenya administration where the judicial system is concerned, the criminal justice system is concerned? Indeed,
it is a positive move, given that now we are separating the institutions being investigated from initially they were literally investigating themselves, and that is why the success rate has been very low. So this is indeed a move in the right direction. And of course, there are a number of other positives I've seen there on especially the financial independence of the police service. Although again, we have a challenge with the principal administrative secretary is still an appointee of the president, and even the CEO of the police service is literally a friend of the president. So again, that independence is not real, but on paper.
Isabella is laughing.
Let me comment on that. Right? You have to give credit where it's due. That we noted that at least they were very well aware what autonomy does to the National Police Service. So, of course, we were given and then it was taken back. However, it's good to note and commend, or even then later on advise on what can be done to make it even more better. So fine, I know for you, you may not agree with it fully, but for us, we noted that it was a progress.
It's a good move.
In the right direction.
Yes.
Can it be enhanced? Yes. Yes. But was it in the right direction? Hell yes.
Okay. And I'm curious, what has been the impediment with the full implementation of the Coroner General's, the operationalization? Yes.
Certainly, the human rights, the human resource instrument is a bit costly. Yeah. So you have to look at the cost that would maybe get this particular service running. We're talking about 47 pathologists, right, in given county governments. So we're looking at who is this person, how much are they earning, what do they need, and who is even the current, who would be the current Coroner General. Number two, the other thing is when we talk about operationalization, what happens to the current cases of inquest in court? So the transition from that place to the Coroner Service General. And then the other thing is, of course, partnership, collaboration. collaboration and relationships, what does it look like for the Coroner General to work with, say, IPOA? What does it look like? What is the nexus between the Coroner General Service Office to the maybe the DCI? Right? What does it look like with civil society organizations like IMLU when they are coming to maybe partner, or maybe they are maybe representing the interests of families of persons who have died? So there's a level of complexity that is introduced when we want to say that we're operationalizing this service. So it's just not a one-off. So there's the human resource wing, and then there's the other bit of partnership, collaboration, and now maybe getting it running and transition.
All right.
Yes.
And also political goodwill. Because if you look at when the act was passed and now, it's well over 5 years, I think. We've transitioned the whole tenure of a president and now to another regime. So we can also say that there is goodwill to have that implemented. And probably that's a positive with this government. I also want to add that the appointment of the Principal Administrative Secretary of the National Police Service was a recommendation also from the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. So when it was implemented immediately, the president came in place, it was a huge relief for us. We do not want to look at the other areas whether she's an appointment of the appointee of the presidency or a friend of the president. And we must also recognize that we have a constitution that gives all these institutions their own independence. So if your independence is encroached upon, like the way now the CJ is saying, guard our institution, then it's incumbent upon individual leaders of those institutions. If there are commissions, those commissions have chairs of those commissions who should come out and guard their independence. The IG himself has their own independence. The IG cannot be directed by anybody to do anything, except probably under the law, yes.
Really? That
DPP,
is in law.
The DPP, let me finish because we are talking about the law here.
Yeah.
The Office of the Director,
the
Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions can give directions to the IG and also the Minister for Interior on policy matters. And those instructions must be in writing, which essentially means we want a paper trail to see what are you telling the Inspector General of Police. So in my understanding, the Inspector General of Police is an independent office. Whether or not he agrees or acquiesces to his independence being eluded, that is a personal responsibility. And that is why we're saying, in the event that there are heads to roll, for instance, when there were madamanos and extrajudicial killings and all those things, you find that those offices, those officers, the IG himself, is culpable, is taken as an individual and carries individual responsibility. So it doesn't help when you start saying, no, the IG is the friend of the president. The friend of the president, yes. But then, so what? Does that stop you from carrying out your independent duties? So it was a good move for the PAS of the NPS to be appointed. Let's wait and see the implementation of the next phase. I also want to say that independence has also, because we also recommended that the OCSs of Officer Commanding Police Stations becomes IAU holders, so that they can be able to buy food for the Rimadis, to buy fuel. There's even fuel allocation in every police station. It's really helped because you no longer hear that Gari has in mafuta. If you hear a police station saying Gari has in mafuta,
that's common.
Before Mheshimiwa goes, I have a sense of what he's trying to say, and I hear what my senior is saying. So if you look at Article 239 of the Constitution of Kenya, we are told that no security organ will further any political interest or cause. So well, we domicile senior's argument in the law. It's very clear and it's there. However, what I have an inkling that Mheshimiwa wants to talk about is on the ground things are very different. You can tell that there's a structured way in which instructions are sent out, obviously outside the confines of the law. In the law, it is there, but what Mheshimiwa is going to tell you is that it's a bit different, and for us, we've experienced it, and you can see it even in that particular press statement, that indeed the law says that you are independent, but on the ground, things are quite different, and you can tell that there are instructions that come from above.
You reminded me of, you guys reminded me of two incidents. One, when you were talking about the coroner, I remembered the IG talking about hiring of dead bodies, but we'll get into those numbers.
We have to speak about that for sure.
We'll get into that. And then the other thing was, when you're talking about mambo kwa ground ni tofauti, nikakumbuka CS na kumicha. Akisema CS wa matisi.
Out.
I mean, how?
All right, but Mahesh, just quickly in response to what the Commissioner said.
I sincerely agree and appreciate the efforts that have been made to give them the independence that they need. Of course, the appointment of the PAS, the appointment of the CEO, that is a move in the right direction. But again, is it mambo kwa ground? Like my sister here said, things are totally different on the ground. Police, the IG gets instructions from the deputy president that you need to take away all bodyguards of Azimio MPs and Azimio governors, yeah? And he actually does that. The deputy president says it on TV, the IG goes on to execute. What is their independence? Number two, the IG, you said we'll talk about it. It was really unfortunate for the IG to say Azimio hired dead, shot bodies to seek sympathy from the public. That was unfortunate. And to add on to that, as we go on with the discussion, I hope IPOA is actually moving fast, because some of these things don't need lengthy investigations. We know the specific police officer in Mathare who hid behind some kiosk and then identified his target, moved, and within a second, shot that person and moved back. And I'm happy.
Allegedly.
No, that is obvious.
Allegedly. No, until the
so
guy is
obvious.
tried, I assume.
And the media.
Tried and found.
Now, that is where we keep bringing in the law and all this. Yet, really, we saw this guy was literally demonstrating, and the media gave us a video of what the police officer did by moving besides that kiosk.
But you know, if we condemn the guy and had, then it's that amounts to public lynching, and we are here to discuss rule of law.
Now, that is what I'm trying to say. While I appreciate the efforts IPOA has done in the past few years, especially even in exposing the reports that the public brings to their desk, how I wish they can expedite their investigations so that we can have a number of these people involved in these criminal activities dealt with. That one will help also instill discipline in the way police officers actually carry themselves out.
Okay. All right. Commissioner, I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Sure.
Isabella?
I have something to say, because it was commented partly by the Commissioner, and now it's coming in here, and it's also in that particular press statement. The independence and the funding, especially the funding structuring of investigative agencies and authorities, is quite important. IPOA remains a formidable partner, especially around cases of extrajudicial execution and cases of torture. But if you're not funding them as they should be, what is it that we are saying? Because then you kind of limit their mandate without saying. And currently what we believe as IMLO is that IPOA's mandate needs to even be expanded, right? We are thinking, do we need IPOA to even oversight protests? Are we able to have them in those spaces so that when we write to maybe the officer commanding station of a certain place that, hey, we're going to have a peaceful procession on this particular road, do we then have the chance or the pathway to go and serve the specific IPOA office in that particular area to say, please come and also oversight? Because the duty to protect and ensure security during procession that should not only be limited to the National Police Service. We have an oversight authority that is doing their very best, I believe. Why don't we then have them there? So Mheshimiwa is saying that, I mean, they could move faster, they could, but are we looking at what it is that could make them do better? Right? Are we questioning how limited their mandate is? Are we looking at the amounts of money they receive annually for them to support? I speak like this because as civil society, we do not enjoy the investigative muscle that IPOA enjoys, right? So we sort of rely on them. What we simply do is provide direct service provision and support, but we have to rely on a state agency to support us. And I'm saying this because I would want for us to discuss the numbers therein so that you see what it is that we have done and how limited our work is is and who it is that we rely on. The first point of call would be the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, the Internal Affairs Unit, and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So it is fair that we think they can move faster, but it is also right that we ensure that they have the tools required for them to move as fast as we want them to.
All right, so let's take a break, but when we come back, I'll look at the rest of the statement, some of what you've talked about, the numbers and urban youth, which has been highlighted in this report. Commissioner, I'll also give you opportunity to tell us about your independence. Are you independent? Ama hamko independent, you hamna mboga, or and maybe security yenu ni polisi na mna investigate polisi on the other side of this break. Back. All right, thank you for staying with us on AM Live, and we're discussing police brutality and the youth. Dan Wangi coined the phrase cops and clobbers based on cops and Robert. Anyway, we looked at, I just wanted to finish up with this particular report, and so we looked at, and you'll tell us about the deliberate torture of children. We looked at that already. Ending police abuse, especially against urban youth, through enhancing police oversight. And you identify here IPOA, the National Police Service Commission, and creating an ombudsman to monitor human rights violations. To achieve this, the current government committed to ending extrajudicial executions, enforced disappearances, and enhancing police oversight through bodies like IPOA and the NPSC. Unfortunately, our data reveals a troubling trend from October 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023. So about as much time as the Kenya Kwanza administration has been in office. We documented 482 cases of torture and related violations, more than double the cases documented in a similar period between the years 2021 and 2022. It is indeed troubling. This marks a staggering increase of 250 cases increase compared to the 232 violations reported in a similar period, that is October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. Out of this, 351 were torture, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishments, 128 were extrajudicial executions, and 3 were enforced disappearances. Shockingly, the majority of victims, survivors, were young males. Young male adults aged 18 to 35 years, accounting for 314, while those aged 36 to 65 years constituted 121, 0 to 17 years comprised 44, and those over 65 accounted for 3 persons, majority 415 being male, 67 female. But before I continue with this particular statement, several things arise for me, Isabella. And one for me, Isabella. And one is, are you inflating figures to secure your donor funding? No, I'm asking this because the president, no, Isabella, the president the other day asked when he was at the Mo Ibrahim event at the KICC, and he said civil society organization play to the tune of the piper.
Olive, those... In fact, even what you said and what was said is inherently reckless, especially because civil society organization of the stature that IMLU, enjoys and has enjoyed for 30 years cannot be based on donor funding. We will be here with or without donor funding, given the kind of work that we do. IMLU has a very a strong muscle in forensic pathology and ensuring that we document our cases based on medical legal reports. So everything you see right there in terms of data has a backing. So we have consents from clients and victims as well as survivors. We have legal statements that were taken by advocates of the High Court of Kenya, and we have medical reports, be it psychological report, be it medical or forensic pathology reports. So for us, it's not a question of donor funding. It is the kind of work that we do based on our mandate. So the recklessness around this particular statement, especially when it comes to IMLU as an organization, is unfounded. It's not about donor relation. It's because we have had a problem, not just now, but a problem that stems, a systemic problem that stems right into the 90s and even before. You see, the kind of work that IMLU does is around policing, police reforms and law enforcement reforms. And a little bit of context, historically, The police are supposed to ensure that you enjoy the right to property, right to life, and just peace. Yeah, but what we have seen over time, and I think we picked this from the colonial period, is that we police to punish. Yeah, what we like to call punitive policing. So therein is where IMLU was born and has been doing this work from that particular time. We simply do not collect data, we do not inflate. Every single thing that you have there has a file and can be verified at any time. And having said that, let's take you to the data. So now we know for a fact that it would be unfair, truly, to simply compare a government to whatever, any other period. So what we did is we looked at what things looked like, given that we document as per the Istanbul Protocol, what it looked like between October 2021 and August 2022, which is a fair period. We didn't go back to 1950, We felt like the dynamics were stable and same. Mm-hmm. And then we looked at what it is that we saw October 2022 through to August 2023. I think that's fair. I really believe that's fair. And then now you look at the promises that were issued on 1st of June. I don't think there's a very big lapse in terms of time. So now when we talk about a 108% increase in violations, which is 250, we genuinely do have a problem. It's not shock therapy that we're trying to do. We are saying, hey, we are forecasting a dark period where we will go back to torture and extrajudicial executions being used as a tool to repress, right? Or even scare people from enjoying their democratic rights. That's all we are saying. We're saying, hey, look here, we like what you've done, but there's a problem here. Could we do better? And that's why we give very strong recommendations. So in terms of the data, verifiable, accessible to anyone who'd like to see. But now let me speak again in terms of the torture of children.
Okay, so before you get to that, numbers. Commissioner, it's not the first time I've hosted you in this studio. Yes. In fact, the last time you were here, ED, IMLU, yes. Peter Kiama was here. And I remember that we had the issue of numbers. So he told us these are the numbers we can verify. But we talked about reportable deaths, or rather Isabella talked about something called reportable deaths. And you told us you have not been receiving this information from the National Police Service as you ought. Has that changed?
Well, that hasn't changed much, but I also want to go a little back because Muhesh commented something about if we were fast enough to carry out investigations and, get
you would data.
Yes, I want to assure Muhesh that our investigations are complete. And our files are with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions because we are not the head to the investigation. We investigate, we recommend, and then we take it to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We have been waiting to see those police officers in court. And also for Isabella, she says that we needed to have the mandate to go with the demonstrators. We did that. We carried out our usual monitoring of the demonstrations. Our officers were with the demonstrators, with our own gadgets, with our own, camouflaged gadgets and, collecting evidence. So that too, we also did that. As for the cooperation, we still get those charges. Some officers will obviously report those deaths to us within 24 hours. Others will not. And therefore, by the time we go to the scene of crime, may it be a police cell, we will find that probably they have even moved the body to the morgue. So we start recreating the scene of crime. So those are some of the charges that we have. But we lately have some sort of, cooperation and collaboration because of, we've been a bit innovative so that we could get somewhere. Because we want to be confrontational with the National Police Service. It even becomes more difficult. Because even some of the investigations we have to do, we have to take them to the forensic lab, which is still under the DCI. Yep. So the same guys we're investigating are expected to give us the results of the forensic outcomes and reports. If we go for post-mortem reports, we have to do it under the auspices of probably the doctors who are carrying out the post-mortem reports. And that's why we were saying the Coroner General would be the right person to do that because it will be a duty under that coroner. So nothing much has changed. But in terms of numbers, we also have noted a spike of complaints. For instance, between the period that she mentions, we got about almost 30,000 complaints, out of which about 9,000 were the ones we recommended to go for full investigations, while others we also passed on to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the Internal Affairs Unit, also the DCI, and other institutions. So we have noted a spike in numbers, but our data is normally strictly on where our investigations have been complete. And that is when, because it's evidence-based, and we need to prosecute. So we cannot just go out there and quote numbers where we have not verified and put them in our data and recommended for prosecutions, because we can also attract litigation. Even if we are a government agency, we are careful, because the people we oversight are public officers as well, and they have families, and they have a difficult job to do. So before we say a police officer is culpable, we like to go into the details. We like to do our investigations very, very meticulously, because we do not want to, because the moment a complaint letter goes into a member's, by this, when I say a member, I mean a police officer's file, then it means that police officer will not be cleared. He has a case, or she has a matter under investigations by the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. So the back and forth may even stop their promotion, their transfers, you know. I mean, and that's difficult. So we like our numbers. When we quote numbers that we have taken to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, or matters that are already pending before courts.
Okay, because you preempted my next question, and I was asking if you have figures independent to what IMLU are presenting. You have said you have witnessed a spike.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I've looked very closely at the IMLU's report, and that's why I'm saying some of the comparative data that I see is the number of the complaints that we have received. It's gone up, and also the number of cases that we have also referred to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, because they are human rights based. They have also gone up. So even if I cannot verify and I cannot give hours from the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, because they are investigative in nature, they are pending, some of them are pending matters, or investigations are ongoing. So I hesitate, you know, to do that in a national television. But I will not contradict the report. I'll just say that it seems comparative, because the numbers we are getting are so higher, and we also know IMLU. IMLU has worked with the independent policing for the longest time, and other civil society organizations, because even if we are a state agency, we collaborate and work very closely with civil society, because they are the ones who drive change, and sometimes we get they are the ones who bring witnesses to us. Social justice centers, these people, they are the ones who come with the witnesses, all people who have been brutalized by the police officers. Right. So whenever we get into problems of getting witnesses, it's them that sometimes you go to get those facts.
Yeah. I have a follow-up, just one follow-up, then you'll come in, because nataka comment on zote mbili. Yes. Bado Isabella, sijamalizana. On these figures, aside from what I'm asking about donor funding, the other accusation that is often leveled against civil society organization is you're advancing the opposition agenda. And I say that because sometimes what you're pushing for happens, how do I put it? Like when you talk about freedom of association, freedom of...
free to protest.
Yes, etc. It's the same thing we'll hear the opposition, because they're the ones on the streets saying that these freedoms are being infringed. When you talk about extrajudicial killings, and the opposition comes, they also have their own figures, and they come and say there have been these extrajudicial killings. Yes. Then Inspector General of Police comes up and says, "Apana, these ones, they're pushing an agenda." Yes. So if you happen to be saying the same thing, then there are those who will argue that these guys are pushing which agenda? The opposition agenda. Okay. What's your response to that?
Olive, is it criminal to be in the opposition? Is it?
No.
There's no law, right? And I'm saying this just the way our executive director said it. It's not criminal to be in opposition. And we have stated it rightly that we are apolitical and remain apolitical. So in the highly unlikely event that our cause matches any other cause, that does not mean that we are conjoined. Right? And we expect that if you have a live opposition in place, it is that they will be on the side of the people, which civil society has always been on. Okay? So for us, it's not the donor, it's not opposition, it's not the state, it's the people, especially founded on human rights. But still, then again, I ask, is it criminal to be in the opposition? like we were giving examples, which were given yesterday again. Take, for instance, policy. How do you move policy reforms and do advocacy without like a champion? These champions you pick from the opposition. They speak very boldly and meticulously around human rights causes if they believe in them, right? You have to appreciate the fact that the civil society can only reach a certain level, and we need furtherance of policies, human rights spaces, opening up of the civil society space in terms of the environment that they can operate in, and you do not do that by yourself. It's also useful to appreciate the critical space that partnerships provide. So if you partner with a person in opposition to say, hey, could you please look at what this the National Coroner Service Act says, and could you please then move it accordingly in the House? I see no problem with that. But then again, like I said, we remain apolitical. These numbers are not politically informed. And when we go again into details with the numbers, you'll notice that we're not speaking only of anti-government protests, Olive, truly. We have monitored so many other protests. Even before 2023, again, there were protests on what? Water. The motorbike riders were protesting. We also monitored that. Were they anti-government? They weren't. But did we lose people? Yeah. They shot and killed. I think somewhere, yes. So truly, I mean, and the blurry line has always been, and the easy outcries, they're political, new opposition. No, that's not the position. Okay. These are human rights violations that need to be treated and responded to as such. Emotional responses to systemic questions around police reforms is where we go wrong. We don't need emotional responses. We need tact.
Okay. Mhesh, nakuja kwako, nataka kuangalia kitu because I want you to speak to the issue of children. Yeah. The significant increase in cases of torture and related violations from 232 in the previous year to 482 in the period from October 2022 to August 2023 indicates a failure to curb police abuse of power, including excessive, unnecessary, illegal and disproportionate use of force and firearms. This alarming rise not only shows a lack of progress, but also suggests the situation has worsened. Furthermore, the fact that the majority of victim survivors are young adults aged 18 to 35 is particularly troubling. President Ruto's promise was aimed at protecting urban youth from police abuse, yet they continue to be disproportionately affected by these violations. And moving towards what your recommendations are, accountability, independence and oversight. You've also talked about IPOA's financial structuring and resources not being prioritized during the Kenya Kwanza administration. Utaongea commissioner hapa, undermining its effectiveness in accountability and justice for victims. The promised ombudsman to monitor human rights violations has not been appointed, and cases of abuse have escalated, particularly during public order management. Expressions and statements that commend law enforcement violations and issuance of shoot-to-kill orders worsen an already critical situation. Yes. The contradictory rhetoric surrounding police reforms amplifies violations and confuses the nation's progress on accountability. Chances of accountability have dimmed as a result of police refusal to record complaints from victims of police abuse, the failure to report all injuries and deaths to IPOA as required by law, the denial of occurrence book numbers, P3 forms, and the lack of investigations into police misconduct contribute to a lack of accountability and impunity. Establishing a special tribunal for gross human rights violations and enforced disappearances. While IPOA plays a vital role in police oversight, its mandate does not extend to covering all perpetrators, including from the military, Kenya Forest Service and Kenya Wildlife Service, especially where the latter are not operating under police command. And ensuring compliance with court rulings, and you had mentioned EPRA, iko hapa pia. The government commitment adhering to all judgments and orders against it within a 60-day time frame is certainly commendable, yet despite some notable progress, such, and I had mentioned them earlier, the non-operationalization of key legislations, namely the Public Benefits Organization Act, establishment of the County Policing Authority, remains a source of concern. These legislative measures are essential for enhancing governance and accountability. Equally troubling are instances of government disregard for court rulings, exemplified by the implementation of fuel prices despite existing judgments, generating financial independence, granting financial independence to the police. I think we already discussed that in some length. And so, finally, back to the end of the statement. What is IMLU saying?
Olive, let's stay a little bit and unpack the torture of children. Yeah, and this obviously happened in the context of public order management. So how do we explain the tear gassing of children in their own class? Because we keep saying, you know, these people were rioters, they were armed, they were hitting and killing the police. So tell me how you go into a school and tear gas children, unprovoked. So obviously therein lies the spike in terms of numbers violating children. The other bit is children are in a playing ground, right? And you tear gas them close range, cracking some of their skulls and hitting them, and it's exploding on their skin, so they have skin rashes. What would a 14-year-old girl do? How dangerous is a 14-year-old girl to a police officer who is armed? What I feel like if we stay a little bit there, then we'll see how these gross violations are now meted on people, and we've been coaxed to think it's just okay. And simply because we do not report on this, and because, I mean, it's not political, you injured about 44 kids, that's totally fine, but it isn't, right? When we were speaking about torture in the 90s, we're looking at the political class, lecturers, students. Why are we speaking about a 1-year-old dying because of a tear gas lobbied in their house? Who was protesting in their house? If we look at public order management, Olive, we have 4 instances. So we have the lawful, the licensed kind of protests. We have the unlawful, obviously, criminal activity. You didn't send notice and so on and so forth. We have the spontaneous, right? And we have single cause issues, maybe the industrial or whatever. So out of these 4, where were these kids placed? Were they unlawful protesters? They weren't. Why do we need to have a 14-year-old girl now who can't speak or hear because they were violated by a police officer? So for those numbers, they look like numbers, they look like data, but if you place them on a human body, that's when you'd understand. And I think I'll also take this chance to speak about the hiring of dead bodies. Categorically, every extrajudicial execution reported on by IMLO has a forensic documentation to it. It also has identification, verifiable identification documents. So whatever that was done by any political class or group, we do not associate with that, but for us, we know for a fact that that is what we have. So therein lies why we feel like these recommendations are very strong. So first and foremost, because
before we get into the recommendations,
yes.
Mahesh, as you've rightly pointed out in the statement, Brian Mushiri captured that clip of the president during an interview by the media roundtable, let me call it that. And he talked about a container. There used to be a container in Nairobi, at least in Nairobi area, where extrajudicial killings used to happen. He referenced Rivayala. And the sins of their predecessors. And they made a commitment that they will bring an end to extrajudicial killings. And yet, when we read this report, when we listen to IPOA, they are saying in the last period of, in the amount of time Kenya Kwanza has been in office, there has been a spike in these disturbing occurrences. What do you make of that?
You know, it was disgusting to see the president applaud the police for their brutality against demonstrators sometime early mid this year during the demos against the high cost of living. And that is what gives police officers and their seniors the big head to go ahead and continue brutalizing Kenyans and continue killing Kenyans. And that is why I was saying, once IPOA starts dealing with them individually, they will realize the political excitement, or what I can call the trivial utterances by the political class that seems to protect them is not anchored anywhere in the law. I want to say something about the spike in cases reported. That I want to commend IPOA. You know, in the past, IPOA was, can I say, domiciled in the capital, yeah? But now, a lot of people know about IPOA. People have realized we have somewhere we can actually report the unfair conduct of the police. So that it is not necessarily that cases have increased. It is also about what I can call advocacy by the civil society, that you can actually report these issues to IPOA for them to be action to be taken against police officers. And again, there's something you said, or the president said about the civil society, and I've heard them say this again and again, even against Boniface Mwangi and all these people, that it is because they are seeking the attention of their funders. That is unfortunate, and that is reckless. You know, because when you're in opposition, you are trying as much as possible to attract the masses to your side. And the issues that affect the masses are the things you speak to. And somehow, it is the same things the civil society is trying to advance. So the interests somehow converge. And that does not mean that the civil society is working with the opposition. When IMLU is doing their job, yeah, how come they don't say that IPOA is working with the opposition? Because IPOA literally is against what the police are doing. They're saying you can do your job within a certain parameter. Yeah? So it is unfortunate and unfair for government to continually give that excuse, to continually disparage the civil society as they advance their cause. I call it depleted creativity in the part of government, if that is how they look at it. Okay. Sometimes, you know, as a leader, you take blame and say, to become a better leader, you take blame and say, here, tumekosea, and we are going to do something about it, you see? Right. And so when you throw around that jibe of the civil society is seeking international attention, to get funding, that is traditional.
Right. Isabella, narudi kwako. I just wanted, Commissioner, because I'll come to you so that you can
also
look at the
urban youth.
We can look at the
Urban youth. You know, urban youth are the most exposed in this sense. Number one, they are exposed to information and they know their rights. Unfortunately, they do not have adequate opportunities. As a government, Kenya needs to retool them and for the modern market, for the modern job market. Now, a young Kenyan in Nairobi has no job, and then he's caught touting, you know, it is against the law. But the process of having him arrested, the officer uses brutal force. So he has to speak and say, stop harassing me, stop, you know, it is different from what a young person in the rural parts of the country will do. The one in the rural parts will say, it's okay, let's go to the police station. Over here, he'll try to say, it is my right, why are you arresting me? Why are you beating me up? You know? And then some even want to take videos. It is in that process that urban youth are brutalized. It is in that, in those scenes that they're actually killed. And sometimes... But
you know, I have a question for you, which we'll come back to after Commissioner responds to something. Isabella, you'll be there too.
I want to tie what he's just said. Allow me. What Mheshimiwa is underscoring here is a classic case of doublespeak. So you have a sitting president, possibly the only one, acknowledging the institutionalization of extrajudicial execution, acknowledging publicly.
Yes,
then
by the former regime.
Backtracking and commending brutality. So what exactly are we dealing with? Are we okay with ensuring that, you know, the security of the person is enjoyed by Kenyans, or are we not? What are we interested in? I think that's something we need to come alive to.
And
right?
I'll tell you, probably they will ask you, are they supposed to sit back and watch people destroying the expressway? Mehesh, the question that I'm coming to you with is, and with, in last comments, yes, the recommendations I'll read out, isn't it you, guys, no, politicians, who expose this urban youth, put them in the line of fire? By getting them, because there have been accusations that you hire them to demonstrate. But Mehesh, Commissioner, also Mehesh, yeah. This statement, quickly, if we could in 2 minutes each, IPOA's financial structuring and resources have not been prioritized during the Kenya Kwanza administration.
No, I want to say that I don't think there is any government institution that says that their budget is as they requested. So equally, we also defend our budgets in Parliament. So we go before the Parliamentary Committee on Security and defend our budgets there. And I will not sit here and lie that our budget has been, except, of course, the budget cuts that happen are close. But we've not been stifled for resources. What I can say is that we have an establishment by SRC of about 1,500 staff. But we are operating with barely about 270 staff across the country, across all the 8 regions where how we have formulated ourselves. So our capacity is not as we would want it to be. So our budget is about $1 billion an year. And half of that amount goes to PE, you know, I mean personal emoluments. So, and we only have one service, a police oversight service. So if you think about 8 investigators investigating 150,000 approximately police officers, you can see we are operating below par. But I am not saying that there has been any deliberate effort to stifle us or funds. In fact, on the issue of disappearance, enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings, those 2 issues, they are issues that we have even taken to the presidency. We have sat with the president, and he assured us that he's going to form a commission, a judicial or a public commission on that. We still believe that that is going to happen, because until that happens, we will not hear voices from people who have lost their kin and kith, who have disappeared or killed by the police. We want them to come before a commission of inquiry to give out their stories so that recommendations can be made, and then that matter can be dealt with once and for all. So, so for me, I think we are moving well. We do not have a good capacity. But on the issue also of enforced disappearance, because Honorable Kibagedi is here, we do not have a standalone law, you know, in our penal code on enforced disappearance. And that is a matter of legislation. We deal with kidnappings. But you know, kidnappings are more like different from enforced disappearance. Yes, so we need that piece of legislation, and that can come only from Parliament. Secondly, within the National Police Service, we do have a subordinate tribunal, you know, they call boardroom proceedings, where they hold their own to account before they get to us. And I think if those are operationalized and are fair to the officers, then we would be dealing with the officers before the matters come to IPOA, and that can also reduce the number of brutality within the service, and also to align the service standing orders, particularly Schedule 5, and the National Police Service Act on the issue of police use of force. That way, I believe we will be dealing now more with a service that has cleansed itself internally before they come to external oversight like that of ourselves. Okay. So we are not denied of cash, but we want more because we do not have enough to be able to oversight the number of the officers that we have. All right. And
Isabella, in your concluding remarks, and I'll come to you last because kuna swali yako inapenda, but in like two minutes. Yes. It's the youth that have historically disenfranchised, and whether it's an issue of being more exposed or it's an issue of they're desperate enough to take money to whatever, bend to the will of the political class. What's so astonishing then about the figures? Because you said you have an issue with that 65% urban. Is it 65% urban youth?
Yes, 65. So quickly, the people you're referring to are criminals. So when we talk about, oh, you're getting money from the political class and going to the streets and throwing stones, that's not a protester. A protester has to be unarmed and peaceful. So the moment we cross over...
And with a cause.
Yes, and obviously with a cause, and it's done, in, you know, as the way the law requires. So all these other people we're talking about are criminals, and we have criminal procedures that should take care of them. But now for us, the people we're talking about here are simple Kenyans who, as per the Constitution of Kenya, have the right to life and dignity, right? And that particular demographic is critical for us because it was promised by the current government. They had a keen interest on them. And we still do have a keen interest on them, especially because we have seen that they are the ones that are violated mostly, and they're in conflict of the law, especially during arrests, during pre-trial, and while in custody. So obviously there's an interest therein, and also, I mean, look, with the current 56 million Kenyans, that's the biggest number, right? That's the biggest number. So if that's the biggest number, and we expect that at least we will move towards enhancing democracy, enjoying of political rights, who is it that you go to first? Mheshimiwa will tell you that possibly that would be the biggest chunk of your voters. Those are the people who comprehend. They have a vested interest in how this particular country grows. So as it was the interest of the current government, it was also our interest to report on them. And if you look at 2016, IMLU has been in the business of undertaking torture prevalence surveys. And in 2011, it came up as the biggest demographic with respect to violations, even in 2016. Certainly, we're planning to do another prevalence survey, and that would still remain an area, and also aligning to the SGDs, truly.
Okay.
Those are the people that you have keen interest on. Yes.
All right. Please, just 2 minutes, Jackson. Jackson Dangu is my director. 2 minutes. Dennis Ndenga, please. I know, Radio Meets TV nakuja.
Yeah.
Mhesh.
Thank you. Now, one, I would like to sincerely commend what this wonderful sister and the organization she represents are doing. And number two, also commend IPOA for what they have done so far. And I know they can do better. Of course, Commissioner didn't want to openly complain on TV that they are underfunded, so that they can increase on the number of personnel that will help them, especially in the mashinani, uko mashinani kabisa. So, but still, they are really doing a good job. On the issue of young people, it is about time now we move from the policing part and look at how we retool young people to expose them to markets beyond our borders so that they can get jobs. Because a bulk of our young people that get involved in criminal activities or even all these things that we are saying is because they don't have jobs. On the issue of politicians sending young people, I give you an example of a young man who is touting. How can a politician send someone to go and tout? My sister Olive. That is far-fetched. And even when they were doing their demos against the cost of living, it is a cost. It is something that everyone is feeling. And I believe soon, again, we'll be seeing a lot of these demos, given the rise in cost of fuel and the taxes that this the government has an appetite for, right, in terms of the amounts they want to deduct from Kenyans. I don't know whether it is my last
yes,
time
last.
I would like also to, this is way out of this, I would like to encourage young people of this country to get off drugs and to keep off drugs. Drugs are destroying a generation. And again, it is because of joblessness. Please go for technical training.
Okay.
Opportunities are available beyond our borders.
They are threatening to fade us out. But I want to thank my panelists this morning. Anthony Kibagendi, MP Kitutu South, Isabella Obara, Technical Lead, Litigation and Legal Advice, IMLU, John Waiganjo, Commissioner IPOA. I know we haven't discussed everything, but I will make another opportunity to do so, because Commissioner, unajua, wewe unakuja. Hakuna shida. AM Live, my name is Olive Burrows, Radio Meets TV. Coming up next with The Morning Fix.